June 1534, Constantinople. The roar of the hippodrome fades as the heavy iron bolts of the sovereign's chamber slide shut. Outside, the city feasts on roasted ox and sugar statues. Inside Topkapi Palace, the air is cold and smells of dried wax. Hurrem Sultan stands before Suleiman the Magnificent. She is no longer a slave. She has just done the impossible. She has forced the Sultan of the world to sign a legal marriage contract, nikah, shattering 3 centuries of Ottoman law. She fingers the heavy emerald ring on her hand, a weapon forged in gold. It is the only thing heavier than the silence in the room. Tonight isn't about love, it is a demolition. By entering this room as a legal wife, she has effectively signed the death warrants of the Sultan's other sons. How did a Russian captive manipulate the most powerful man on earth into destroying his own dynasty's rules? And what deadly price has she already agreed to pay for this crown? Every wedding bed is a grave for someone else. History is forged in shadows. If you enjoy these dark histories, leave a like and subscribe and comment below where you're listening from. And now, back to the story. To understand the terrifying silence of that wedding chamber in 1534, one must step back into the noise that preceded it. The path to the Sultan's bed began in the mud of a Crimean slave market years earlier. Records suggest Alexandra Lisowska was dragged from Rohatyn, tied by the wrists to a line of other weeping girls, and marched until the leather cut to the bone. By the time she reached Constantinople, she was no longer a person. She was inventory. Inside the harem of the old palace, identity is scrubbed away with rough brushes and scalding water. The structure is built on erasure. Here, names are burned, and new ones are assigned like serial numbers on a crate of spices. She was named Hurrem, the Laughing One. It was a cruel irony imposed by the Valid Sultan, the Queen Mother. They demanded she smile while they inspected her teeth and hair, assessing her value as a breeding vessel. She learned quickly that the stone walls of the seraglio were thick enough to swallow a scream, but a laugh would echo, making her seem harmless. She was placed at the bottom of a hierarchy, as rigid as iron. At the top sat Mahidevran Sultan, the mother of the heir, wearing the silken jewels of a confirmed favorite. Hurrem was given the rags of a novice. The emerald ring glinted on the hands of the powerful women who controlled her food, her sleep, and her breath. For years, Hurrem was forced to bow, to scrape the floor, to serve those who saw her as nothing more than flesh to be used and discarded. She watched the other girls vanish, some into the Bosphorus in weighted sacks, others exiled to the Palace of Tears when they failed to please. But Hurrem did not vanish. She practiced a quiet, terrifying resistance. She learned Ottoman Turkish not to recite poetry, but to understand the laws that kept her enslaved. She realized that in this pit of gold and jealousy, obedience was a slow death. When Mahidevran, threatened by Hurrem's rising favor, assaulted her in the corridors, scratching her face and pulling out clumps of her red hair, Hurrem did not fight back. She took the beating. She wore the blood on her face like war paint and refused to cover it when summoned by Suleiman. She presented him with the visceral proof of the harem's brutality. Every scar is a map to a hidden door. Suleiman offered her a frantic, guilty mercy. He offered to send Mahidevran away, to shower Hurrem with gifts, to make her the supreme favorite. It was a golden cage, a bribe to keep her quiet and compliant. But Hurrem saw the hidden price of this mercy. To remain a favorite, Hatun, was to remain a slave, property that could be sold or executed the moment the Sultan's interest waned. She refused the mercy. She did not want to be a favorite. She wanted to be an institution. She maneuvered Suleiman into manumitting her, freeing her from slavery under the guise of pious charity. It was a masterstroke. Once free, Islamic law forbade the Sultan from sleeping with her unless he married her. She had used his own faith to lock the bedroom door. Freedom is a weapon that cuts the hand holding it. The condition was absolute, spoken through the lattice screen of the harem to the chief black eunuch, who trembled to deliver the message. Hurrem was now a free woman. Her manumission paper, signed by Suleiman's own hand in a burst of pious generosity, lay on her table next to a burning candle. The wax dripped onto the wood, marking the passing hours of a standoff that paralyzed the Topkapi Palace. Suleiman summoned her to his bedchamber that night. It was a command that had never been refused in the history of the House of Osman. To refuse the Sultan was treason. To deny his touch was to invite the executioner's bowstring. But Hurrem did not go. She sent back a single cold refusal that shattered the air like a dropped vase. "I am a free woman of the faith," she reportedly told the eunuch. For a free woman to share a bed with a man who is not her husband is zina, a mortal sin. The palace held its breath. This was the test. Hurrem had taken the very instrument of her oppression, the strict religious law that governed the empire, and turned it into armor. She was gambling with her life. The Valide Sultan, Hafsa, urged Suleiman to exile the insolent Russian witch, to cast her into the Bosphorus for her arrogance. The pressure on Hurrem was suffocating. She was isolated in her chambers, the heavy oak doors barred from the outside. The harem turned against her, a collective organism rejecting a foreign virus. They cut her rations. They whispered threats of poison in the dark. They waited for the guards to come and drag her to the executioner's stone. But the guards never came. Instead, the silence from the Sultan's quarters grew heavy. Suleiman, the Caliph of Islam, the shadow of God on earth, found himself trapped by his own piety. He could not force a free Muslim woman into sin without delegitimizing his own religious authority. The deprivation was not Hurrem's, it was his. She had weaponized his desire, turning his obsession into a cage. Days turned into weeks. The stone walls of the palace seemed to sweat with the tension. The Grand Vizier, Ibrahim Pasha, paced the marble courtyards, sensing a shift in the tectonic plates of power. He knew that if Suleiman broke, the structure of the Ottoman dynasty, built on the silence of slave mothers, would collapse. Silence is the only noise that commands a king. Suleiman broke. He could not endure the distance. The refusal, meant to be a suicidal act of defiance, became the catalyst for the unthinkable. He ordered the preparations for a legal marriage. The ceremony on that June night in 1534 was not a celebration. It was a surrender of tradition. The ulama, religious scholars, gathered in disbelief as the witnesses signed the contract. The price of this union was visible in their eyes. For 300 years, Ottoman sultans did not marry their concubines to prevent any single family from gaining power over the throne. By marrying Hurrem, Suleiman was dismantling the safety mechanism of the empire. The why was finally clear to the silent observers. It was not just love. It was a total consolidation of power. Hurrem required security that no slave could possess. She needed the legal standing to protect her sons from the inevitable fratricide that awaited them. The price she paid was the stability of the dynasty itself. By forcing the marriage, she declared war on Mustafa, Mahidevran's son, and the heir apparent. She had secured her position, but she had also ensured that the halls of the palace would eventually run red. As she walked back to the sovereign's chamber, now a queen and not a slave, the heavy emerald ring on her finger felt colder than the stone floor. She had won the trial. She had tested the faith of the Sultan and found it yielding. But as the door clicked shut, locking them in together, the victory felt like a sentencing. She had survived the test of the harem, but she had initiated the war of the princes. The ink on the contract is already turning to blood. The dawn of the morning following the wedding did not bring warmth. It brought a terrifying clarity. As the call to prayer drifted over the golden horn, Hurrem Sultan stood at the window of the sovereign's chamber. She did not return to the old palace, the holding pen for the Sultan's women. That life was ash now. She remained within the walls of Topkapi, the administrative heart of the empire, a fortress of men, iron and ink, where no woman was meant to live. Here, she initiated a wordless rite of possession. She did not pace the room like a nervous bride. Instead, she sat at a low writing desk of inlaid mother of pearl, a piece of furniture reserved for scribes and viziers. She took the heavy emerald ring from her finger. It was no longer just jewelry, it was a seal. She dipped it into red wax and pressed it onto a piece of parchment. In that silence, watching the smoke curl from the extinguished wick, the true nature of the night's transaction was revealed. She was not merely a wife securing a household, she was carving out a physical space in the seat of government. She demanded the construction of a permanent apartment within Topkapi, directly adjacent to the Sultan's quarters. Builders were summoned to break the stone and reshape the palace layout. This architectural violence created the Golden Road, a narrow corridor connecting her new world to the Sultan's private domain. It was a physical umbilical cord that ensured no whisper, no decree, and no secret could bypass her. Proximity to the throne is the deadliest poison of all. For centuries, historians dismissed the harem as a place of leisure, blind to the invisible machinery Hurrem built that morning. But the evidence lies buried in the archives of foreign nations. In the dusty vaults of the Polish crown, letters written in Hurrem's own hand survive. They are not love notes. They are diplomatic missives addressed to King Sigismund II, discussing state borders, slave raids, and peace treaties. This is the hidden truth that the wedding night concealed. Hurrem had effectively stage-managed a coup. By marrying Suleiman, she bypassed the Grand Vizier and the military judges. She positioned herself as the Sultan's primary political intelligence. She began to feed him information, curate his news, and isolate him from his other advisors. The rebirth was not of a woman, but of the Ottoman state itself. The absolute monarchy was dissolving into a shared rule, a sultanate of women that would steer the empire from behind a lattice screen for the next century. She looked down at the wax seal on the desk. The impression left by the ring was deep and permanent. She had traded her body for the empire, and in doing so, she had become the most dangerous person in the room. Not because she could command armies, but because she now controlled the mind of the man who did. The wedding was a disguise. The marriage was an infiltration. The walls have ears, and now they speak with her voice. The wedding feast ended 5 centuries ago. The roasted ox is dust. The sugar statues dissolved into the mud of the hippodrome long before the witnesses died. But the silence that began that night in the sovereign's chamber spread outward until it swallowed the entire dynasty. The erasure was methodical. Ibrahim Pasha, the Grand Vizier who stood as the only barrier between Hurrem and absolute influence, was found strangled in his sleep shortly after the marriage, his immense palace left to rot. Prince Mustafa, the heir whose existence threatened Hurrem's children, was silenced by a silk cord in a soldier's tent. His father, watching the execution from behind a linen curtain. The ledger books of the harem show blank spaces where rivals used to be. The ink faded, withholding the names of the women who failed to become Hurrem. History remembers the wedding, but it deliberately forgets the funeral that was being planned at the very same moment. Venetian ambassadors wrote home, their quills scratching out warnings that the Ottoman Empire was now ruled by a Russian ghost. The Sultanate of Women, she inaugurated, turned the iron birdcage of the harem into the cockpit of the state. The rigorous martial empire of the early Ottomans, built on the saddle, was replaced by a sedentary empire ruled from the cushioned divan, just as she had designed it. That emerald ring now sits behind glass in the Topkapi treasury. Tourists stare at it, seeing a symbol of legendary romance, a testament to the Sultan's undying love. They are wrong. It is a monument to survival. On that night in 1534, when the heavy iron bolts slid shut, Hurrem Sultan did not just enter a marriage bed. She entered the engine room of history and destroyed the brakes. She died a queen, buried next to the monarch of the world, the only slave to ever lie beside her master in eternal rest. The empire she reshaped eventually crumbled into the Bosphorus, but the rule she wrote that night remains etched in the stone. Power is not given to the rightful. It is seized by the silent. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like. The only thing louder than a scream is a signature.